Okay, yes, I'm fully aware that we are currently 5 months into 2020 and I'm barely making my top 10 of 2019 video, but to be fair, I have been a bit busy. I've been doing some schoolwork here and there. I've been catching up on the movies that I missed last year. I've also even been dabbling in a bit of procrastination, believe it or not. But I did decide realistically I'm never going to be fully caught up, so I might as well just get this out of the way. So without further ado, here we go. In 2019, I ended up watching 105 movies. Only 43 of those were released in 2019. And as of May 10th, 2020, I've seen 59 movies. And out of those 59 movies, 18 were released in 2019. Meaning that in total, I only saw 61 2019 films. Here's a quick look at every single movie I've seen since January 1st, 2019 to May 10th, 2020. Overall, I'd say 2019 was a pretty damn good year for cinema. But then again, which year isn't? I truly believe that every year is a good year for film. You just have to do a bit of digging of your own sometimes. Alright, I'll stop stalling. Here are my top 10 movies with 3 honorable mentions. For my first honorable mention, I have the Peanut Butter Falcon. Now, before I do get further into what the story of the movie is about, while I was doing my research on the movie, I found out an interesting fact about it. The writers and directors of this movie, Tyler Nelson and Michael Schwartz, actually met one of the lead actors, Zach Gotteshagen, at a camp for disabled people. And from there, Zach was telling them about his, lifelong dreams about being in the movies and everything. And they took that upon themselves and made the entire movie revolving around Zach's dreams, which I found really, kind and heartwarming of them to do. The story follows Zach as he escapes the nursing home that he lives in order to try to pursue his lifelong goal of attending the wrestling school of Saltwater Redneck. On his way, he encounters Tyler, who is played really well by Shia LaBeouf. Together, they wind through deltas, elude capture, drink whiskey, find God, catch fish, and convince Eleanor, played by Dakota Johnson, to join them on their journey. This is a very well-made, authentic, and original feel-good movie. The 3 main characters have great chemistry together, and they make their journey enjoyable to watch. This was actually one of the first movies that I saw whenever I moved to North Texas, so I may be feeding into a bit of nostalgia here, but I still think it's a really solid movie with a bunch of soul, and I don't think you'll regret watching it. Based on a true story, A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood tells the story of the friendship between Mr. Rogers and a journalist named Lloyd Vogel. Tom Hanks did a great job portraying Fred Rogers in this, and it's honestly really refreshing because it felt as if Tom Hanks was just kind of playing a different version of himself in any movie that he had been in the past 6 years. Although yes, this could also be seen as another feel-good movie, it does deal with darker stances and real-life struggles such as relationship problems, family dilemmas, and even death. I kind of hate to say this just because the Academy is a joke at this point, but a nomination for Tom Hanks for this movie wouldn't have been a bad thing. Even if you're not necessarily familiarized with Mr. Rogers like myself whenever I first saw this, I still think that you'll find something to enjoy in this. I can't really compare this movie to the other Mr. Rogers movie that came out in 2018, Won't You Be My Neighbor, because I haven't seen it, but watching this movie has definitely given me an incentive to watching that one, and who knows, maybe I may even make a video comparing both of them in the near future.
Please won't you be my neighbor?
The newest film by Terrence Malick is also based on a true story. It tells the story of... Okay, I really don't want to butcher this poor man's name, so I'm just going to let Google do it for me. It tells the story of
Franz Jägerstätter,
who was an Austrian farmer who refused to fight for the Nazis in World War II. The only other 2 Terrence Malick movies that I've seen are Night of Cups and Song to Song, so I can't say I'm too familiar with his work. He definitely has his own style that is very, very prevalent throughout all of those projects that I just mentioned, and although it isn't my cup of tea necessarily, I can definitely see why people enjoy it. It's very poetic, and it's not something that I've seen a lot of people do in the filmmaking world. August Deal gives a great performance here, and it's one that'll stick with you way after the movie is ended. I'm ashamed to admit to this, but this is actually only the second August Deal performance that I've seen behind Inglourious Basterds. But seeing his powerful performance as this has definitely intrigued me way more, and I'll be sure to catch up on the stuff he's done in the past years, and it's definitely made me excited for things to come with him. Out of the 3 Terrence Malick movies that I've seen, this is probably my second favorite behind Song to Song, but to be fair, I am probably just a little bit biased towards Song to Song, just because that cast is incredible, man. It has Ryan Gosling, Michael Fassbender, Natalie Portman, Rooney Mara, and I was kind of at the world premiere. I say kind of because I got there a bit too late, so they wouldn't let me in, but I was there, and that's what counts. Also, if you know me personally, you're probably very aware that I bring up South by Southwest every chance that I get, but I'm not sorry for it, and I'm going to keep doing it. Pain and Glory is kind of an autobiographical take on Pedro Almodovar's life. I say kind of because although he does pull major events from his life for the film, there are also a good amount of scenes and characters that were added to tell a more interesting story. The story of the film follows Salvador Malo, played by Antonio Banderas, as he's nearing the end of his directing career. Through the film, we get several flashbacks between a younger Salvador and his mother that serve as a subplot. This was actually my first Pedro Almodovar film, and it will for sure not be my last because I found this film very well made, acted, and directed. Antonio Banderas did a great job, and I am also ashamed to say that I have not seen much of Antonio's work. The most I'm familiarized with him is from the Spy Kids trilogy, shout out Robert Rodriguez, and I know he's done a great amount of work with Pedro, so I'll be sure to catch up on all of those movies that they worked on together. I also particularly enjoyed the ending. I can't really say too much without spoiling it, but once you do watch it, you'll know what I'm talking about. Growing up, I used to love watching the Even Stevens on Disney Channel. I remember even having that movie that was like direct-to-video where they go on vacation. I can't remember the name. Now that I think of it, I think it was just called Even Stevens Go on Vacation. Anyways, fast forward a couple of years and Shia LaBeouf is cast in the new Transformers movies. I won't lie, whenever these movies came out, I loved them. Yes, even Revenge of the Fallen. I even had a couple of Transformers toys and shirts. Every time at the end of the movie, whenever Optimus Prime would give his victory speech and a Linkin Park song would kick in, 9-year-old me would get all giddy. The point I'm trying to make here is that while I was enjoying all of that stuff that Shia LaBeouf was in, I was oblivious to what was going on in his personal life. Written by Shia LaBeouf, Honey Boy follows a very interesting view into Shia's life from his early acting years to present day. I really appreciate that Shia and the director, Alma Harrell, chose to not just tell the story in a standard approach, but rather tell it in a very creative and even surreal approach at times. When you're watching this, you can honestly tell that everyone that worked on this poured their hearts out into it. Everything from the score, to the cinematography, to the acting, to the set designs, everything's beautiful. Great performances in this all around, but specifically from the three main actors. Lucas Hedges, Noah Jupe, and Shia LaBeouf himself. I do think that this movie was overlooked by a lot of people last year, and as of now, it is actually on Amazon Prime, so if you didn't get the chance to watch it in theaters last year, I would definitely recommend you go do this now. Portrait of a Lady on Fire was actually the last movie theater experience I had back in February before this whole pandemic thing broke out. I saw it at the Angelica in Plano, Texas, and I couldn't have asked for anything better at the time. The theater was practically empty. It was just me and some other dude that was sitting at the very back, so honestly I forgot that he was even there. The chemistry between Adele Hanel and Naomi Merlant is undeniable. You never doubt that these two characters are in love for a second. The scenery is immaculate, and it is made even more beautiful by cinematographer Claire Mathon. Celine Sciamma accomplished to create a wonderful piece of art that will be remembered for years to come. This may be another movie that a lot of people missed while it was in theaters, but it is on Hulu now, so you should definitely go check it out if you get the chance. Also, it's French, so you can feel pretentious while you're watching it. The Witch is one of the most refreshing horror movies of the past decade, so when I heard about Robert Eggers' new movie starring Robert Pattinson and Willem Dafoe, I was ecstatic. The Lighthouse is a chamber piece that revolves around two sailors who have been stranded on an island together. What follows is their slow descent into madness. Upon my initial viewing, I wasn't aware of the inspiration that it took from the Proteus and Prometheus Greek mythology tales until a friend of mine pointed it out. My appreciation for the movie grew immensely after finding this out. The cinematography by Jaron Blaschke is another thing that makes this movie so memorable. Also, it really goes without saying that the performances by Robert Pattinson and Willem Dafoe are outstanding. Also, I really hate saying this because it's really basic to say, but the cinematography really is that beautiful, and every shot in itself is a painting of its own. Also, the score for this movie is fantastic. It is very haunting, and it fits the movie extremely well. It definitely adds to the insanity that is already built upon by the world building and Robert Pattinson and Willem Dafoe's performances. Although I do still prefer The Witch over The Lighthouse, there's no denying that The Lighthouse is another hit from Robert Eggers. It's really crazy to think that Robert Eggers is just starting out, and this man has way more hits to give us throughout the years. The Farewell is a movie that caught me severely off guard. Even though I had heard many great things about it prior to watching it and my expectations were kept leveled, it still managed to surprise me. The story follows Billy, played by Awkwafina, as she returns to China once she and her family learn that her grandmother has been diagnosed with terminal cancer. The plot device that keeps this story so interesting and refreshing is that the grandmother is completely unaware of her diagnosis and the family stages an entire wedding as an excuse to visit her during her final weeks. The reason this movie probably stuck with me more than I expected it to is because I related to it in the aspect of living in a different country than my grandmother. Each time you visit is special and you aren't ever sure which visit will be your last. So saying goodbye is just a tad harder. Also, this movie really redeemed Awkwafina for me because prior to this, I thought she was very annoying. But honestly, after saying this, I can see the loads of potential that she has in her acting. I was first introduced to Taika Waititi's work back in 2014 with his sleeper hit What We Do in the Shadows. His dry humor and style of directing got me hooked right away. He later released Hunt for the Wilder People in 2016, which is also a great sleeper hit, and then proceeded to release Thor Ragnarok in 2017. It's undeniably the best Thor movie and for sure one of the best MCU movies in general. I'm actually really surprised that Disney let him do what he wanted with it, since they're notorious for parting ways with directors for having creative differences, which really just means they fired them for being too creative. Making Thor definitely was a good idea on his part, as it puts his name even farther on the map. In doing so, he was able to greenlight Jojo Rabbit, a film that he had finished writing since all the way back in 2012. What we got was a heartfelt coming-of-age story about a young boy in Germany during World War II. The characters Taika wrote are very entertaining to watch on screen, and his portrayal of Hitler is hilarious. What I really love about this movie, though, is that although at its core it is a comedy, it doesn't shy away from showing the grim reality that the Nazis brought to the world. It's very encouraging to see a director who, less than a decade ago, was funding his movies nearly entirely through crowdfunding. Now he's out here making multi-million-dollar movies, getting nominated for the Oscars, and it's needless to say that I'm very, very excited to see what he has coming up next. Knives Out is the type of movie that the whole time you're watching it, you think it's going to go one way, but it ends up going a completely different way than you thought it would time and time again. It took the whodunit genre and flipped it on its head. It also didn't take itself too seriously, and it had a good amount of laughs sprinkled throughout. We're about to get a little off topic here, but here's a hot take. The Last Jedi, although not really good, is the best out of the sequel trilogy. Hear me out. Yes, I know the pacing is pretty bad, the character motives have changed, the ending, although not bad, doesn't really leave us on a cliffhanger or even excited for the next entry. And I'm not saying that it necessarily needs to leave us on a cliffhanger, I'm just saying that it is the middle entry in a trilogy and it should leave us at least a little bit excited for what's to come. We're supposed to be looking forward for what happens next to our characters, but what we got instead is a traditionally told story that ends wrapped in a neat bow. Whenever The Force Awakens first came out, I was obsessed with that movie, but as the years went on, my excitement went down so I could more clearly see the painstakingly obvious retelling of major events in Episode 4. And as for The Rise of Skywalker...
Somehow Palpatine returned.
Yeah, I'll save that for another video. Anyways, I digress. What I meant to get at by talking about The Last Jedi is that I'm glad that Rian Johnson managed to get back on his feet after the mainly negative feedback received from The Last Jedi. You can tell that he was trying to avoid the same thing happening by giving it his all when making this movie. Although I wouldn't necessarily like to see a sequel to this just because I think this movie would be better if it stood on its own, I wouldn't mind if Rian one day decided to revisit the whodunit genre. The blaxploitation era is one of the most interesting and creative eras in cinema history. Even though most of these individuals were only making a very small fraction of the total income, that did not stop them from crafting something authentic and genuine with their very limited budgets. Dolomite Is My Name follows the story of Rudy Ray Moore, who is most popular for his Dolomite movies. Eddie Murphy does a fantastic job portraying Rudy, and it's such a delight because for a while I was under the impression that Eddie was practically retired since he hadn't done much work in the past decade. At its core, Dolomite Is My Name is a movie that revolves around the pure passion for filmmaking and all the hijinks and camaraderie that ensue on set. Jay from Red Letter Media said that he thinks that this movie does a way better job at showing that than James Franco's The Disaster Artist. And honestly, I couldn't agree more. Although I did enjoy The Disaster Artist, I feel as if they relied too much on the meme that is The Room. In doing so, some characters come off as underwritten and lackluster, whereas in Dolomite Is My Name, all the characters feel like real people and their friendship on screen feels genuine. If you're somebody who's taken part in making a movie, or somebody that really wants to be a part of making a movie in the future, then I couldn't recommend this one enough. The Safdie brothers quickly became some of my favorite directors when I watched Good Time back in 2017. They have revitalized the neo-realism movement with their films. Yes, I'm aware that they aren't the only filmmakers using this approach, but they are undoubtedly the biggest at the moment. I admire that even after gaining a following and studio backing, they still remain true to their art, and yes, they do work with A-list actors and they obviously have a way larger budget, but nevertheless, they haven't let that affect their methods in any way. As someone who is a very big fan of Good Time, I was tremendously hyped for this. I did try my best to keep my expectations level though, just to prevent being potentially disappointed. And honestly, I think that it exceeded them. Adam Sandler gave a career-changing performance in this, which was very pleasing to see, especially after that atrocious 5-movie deal that he signed with Netflix, where you can see him get more and more uninspired with each one. That being said, I do think that this movie as a whole was severely snubbed at this year's Academy Awards. 0 nominations for the acting, the directing, the music, 0. Hopefully the snub doesn't push Sandler away from trying similar projects in the future, because I'd sure love to see him in more stuff like this. Daniel Loptane, also known as One-Eo-Thrix Point Never, did another fantastic job composing the score to this, as he did with the score for Good Time. This movie will have you on edge for its entire runtime, and you won't realize how anxious you were the entire time until it's over. The best way to put it is, if you had to pick a movie to best replicate the feeling of riding a roller coaster, this would definitely be the one. Can't recommend this one enough. And now, for my number 1 movie of 2019. Honestly, you can probably guess what it is, since you haven't seen it on the list, and it's without a doubt the most talked about movie of 2019. Yes, you guessed correctly. It's... My Name is Charlie Rain is easily one of the most influential, remarkable, and may I even say revolutionary pieces of cinema in the last 100 years that it just blows your mind. Everything from the directing, to the acting, to the editing, to the music, to the boom guy. It's just so bloody brilliant that you want to... I'm kidding. Like I said, this is the most talked about movie of 2019, so I'm gonna try my best to not replicate just what everybody else and their mother has already said. I saw Parasite in November of 2019. By this point, I was aware of the tremendous amount of critical acclaim that it had behind its belt already. But I went into the showing knowing pretty much nothing besides that. I didn't watch a trailer, I didn't read a plot synopsis, I didn't read full reviews, nothing. And honestly, I think this may just be the absolute best way to experience this movie. Okay, very tame spoilers ahead, so if you want to avoid them, just click to the time mark that's shown on screen. I'll give you a few seconds to leave. Okay, prior to watching the movie, and just by judging by the poster, I knew this movie is or would get dark at some point in the runtime. I went into the showing knowing that much. But once you begin to watch it, you honestly forget, and even though you knew subconsciously that something is coming, it still catches you by surprise. The reason for this is because the first half of the movie is composed so well as a tonally different movie that you entirely vanish the idea of a potential twist in your head. Great performances all around, even from the child actor. One bad child actor can honestly bring down a movie's quality quite a bit for me. Also, the score by Jung Jae II is immaculate, and I can't imagine any other type of music accompanying this film. Like I said earlier, I really hate mentioning the Academy, but I'm really glad that Parasite swept the awards. It is very, very well deserved. And I particularly enjoyed Bong Joon-ho's acceptance speech for Best Director. It was very heartwarming and inspiring. In conclusion, even though I'd love if you watched all the movies on this list, I know it's not realistic. So if you are thinking about watching any movie from this list, make it this one. Believe the hype. Parasite is the best movie to come out of 2019. I'd say this past year was a wonderful year for cinema. We had many great films released this past year that I didn't mention, such as The Irishman, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Under the Silver Lake, and many more. And usually I'd say something like, I hope next year is even better, but seeing as the world is currently in a pandemic, I think it's safe to direct my hope to 2021. And thank you very much for sticking to the very end of the video. It's my first time doing anything like this, so I'm not too familiar with everything that I'm supposed to do. I'm going to try to upload a new video bi-weekly just so this channel isn't dead in between my movie releases. I'm also not going to be strictly limiting myself to film, so I'll be discussing other topics such as music or TV shows. And once again, thanks for watching. I'll catch you in the next video.